What is going on, YouTube? This is Acid Roots. So I'm going to review the fourth album by Kendrick Lamar. Basically, this project is called Damn, and it came out in the spring of 2017. The thing about this particular project is this is before his smash hit sound. This is before his smash hit soundtrack album Black Panther soundtrack from 2018, but it's also after like Untitled Unmastered from 2016, which is like a compilation of unreleased songs as far as that pitch can happen, or at least sketch songs that were getting ready to happen but didn't quite make the album cut as far as that pitch can happen. Then it also follows in terms of like the out in terms of Kendrick's discography, it also follows the popular album To Pimp a Butterfly from 2015. So I'd have to say that was heralded as like one of the top albums of all time. I'd have to say To Pimp a Butterfly. I'm kind of somewhat on the fence about the album. I'm eventually gonna have to get to that project to see the hubbub about it, just to see how good it actually is. It's kind of within the pitch. I've listened to it here and there, but back in the day I didn't enjoy it as much, I'd have to suppose. But back in the day I didn't have as much heralded feelings towards it, I'd have to suppose. But I did definitely like Good Kid, Mad City, and I'd have to say this is definitely one of Kendrick's best projects in my opinion. I definitely feel like this is going to get a pretty high score. I'd have to say definitely appreciate this project. It's up there with C4 and some of those type ones. I feel like some of my favorite Kendrick projects thus far would be C4 and Good Kid, Mad City, I'd have to suppose, but this is another highlighted one. This is definitely one of the better ones I've heard, I would have to say. Has a lot of good pitches on here. The thing about this particular project is Kendrick kind of ditched like the more introspective type style of some of his earlier projects, where this is a conscious album. It's just not as noticeable this time, which I appreciate the concept. But I do appreciate like the thought-provoking Kendrick, but I am glad that he decided to step out on this particular project, particularly with some of these Mike Will Made It beats. It's an interesting concept just because I didn't see Kendrick Lamar and Mike Will Made It kind of teaming up for some production type fare as far as that pitch kind of happens. But there are three Mike Will Made It beats on here. Surprising that he was still as much of a hit producer way out in 2017, just because his time was more 2011, 12, and 13, the early 2010s as far as that pitch kind of happened. But he did put out an album. Mike Will Made It put out an album in mid Mike Will Made It put out an album in early 2017. Kendrick was a part of that project for like a song or something like that, but he does have like a couple beats on there. It's some good concepts. There's some contemporary music on here. Kendrick tries a lot of things in this particular project. This is basically like his contemporary and kind of one of his most commercial albums. This is definitely one of his most commercial albums, I'd have to say, and it pretty much outstrips like I would say Good Kid, Mad City in terms of the single quality on this particular album. He has a #1 on this particular album, which is Humble, which was a big deal back in 2017 when that song particularly kind of came out. And I would have to say on top of that, Love and Loyalty were some extra ones, plus DNA was a pretty huge song. There's a number of songs, there's at least 3 songs that got over 1 billion plays on Spotify. So this project was a pretty huge deal. This is definitely a Spotify classic, I'd have to say, in terms of streaming success and stuff like that. Just an album that continues to get streams and just rakes in like the hits and just streaming potentials and stuff like that. So this is pretty contemporary. This is definitely state of the art for late 2010s. Anything past like 2015 to 2019, I'd have to say just the mid-late second half of the 2010s, this is a pretty heralded album. I would go as far as to say that this might be one of the biggest rap albums of the 2010s, I'd have to suppose. Definitely a good concept. It came out pretty late in the 2010s, but I still would have to say it made enough of an impact to be that much of a deal. All of Kendrick's albums were basically big deals throughout the 2010s, I'd have to suppose. I look after the concept as far as saying that, but it's just kind of, I do feel like, I mean, I like this album more than Good Kid, Mad City, but I would have to say maybe the singles were just a little bit more affable. But then I would have to say maybe they're not, just kind of based upon the concept, just because I look after it. Humble is a pretty smash hit song. I feel like that one might just outstrip Swimming Pools. I feel like Loyalty might outstrip like Poetic Justice in terms of being for the ladies as far as that pitch kind of happens. I definitely feel like Loyalty sounds like a streaming classic as far as that particular pitch kind of goes along with it. And I would have to say that Love is just like a pop rap. And I would say that Love is like a pop rap kind of classic in terms of radio appeal and stuff like that. So this album had the smash hits on there. This is like the album that Revival should have been. I definitely feel like when Eminem was trying to copy that particular template with Revival as far as embracing like pop rap sound of like the late 2010s as far as that pitch kind of happens, Kendrick pulled off this particular vibe of embracing like the mid late 2010s, the trends and stuff like that that were particularly kind of happening around this time, and he embraced it rather well, I'd have to say. Just the execution on this album was pretty severe, I'd have to say. Now there are a few songs on here that I don't recommend as much, but for the most part, this is pretty much like a debatable classic, I'd have to suppose. Definitely feel like it's just debatable. My score might not quite be as high as some of the critics in terms of the pitch of saying that this is one of the best albums of recent times. I'd have to say say anything past like 2013, 2014, this definitely seems one of the best albums of all time, just in terms of the pitch of the impact and stuff like that. But I'd have to say it is going to get a rave score. This album's going to get an 8 out of 10. This album's going to get over an 8 out of 10 for me, I would have to say. So it's a pretty dope concept, kind of get this one in particular. There's definitely some quality stuff on here, and this is the trend-setting kind of album. This did a lot for the particular pitch, just because on at least the first couple albums that Kendrick dropped, like Section 80, Good Kid, Mad City, and To Pimp a Butterfly, he didn't quite have like the full-blown kind of chart appeal. Like I feel like Good Kid, Mad City at least had 3 singles and stuff like that, or 4, 4 or 5 singles that charted pretty heavily just within the relative appeal. But I feel like these are ones that kind of had him cross over into like household name kind of territory. And I kind of question just like the concept of what To Pimp a Butterfly was kind of like in terms of the appeal. In my opinion, I kind of feel like, in my opinion, I would feel like To Pimp a Butterfly by Kendrick is basically like Kendrick Lamar's Strictly for My Niggas album by Tupac, where that one's just kind of a more introspective type one, has more songs like Keep Your Head Up and some of those type tunes as far as that particular kind of pitch happens, and some of those type tunes that were off of like Strictly for My Niggas, I'd have to say some more introspective type fare. And I would say that this particular album, Damn, is basically like Tupac's Me Against the World, where I feel like it's just a quality album, has the contemporary kind of gems on here. It's just a concentrated amount of it's just a concentrated amount of affluence that just hits as like a particular quality album that just has a lot of impact in like its short amount that it kind of has on here. But I still would have to say it's pretty quality just within the aspect of it. So we'll go ahead and talk about the singles here just to get to some of these. There are 3 singles, but the thing about this particular album is just the fact that there were like there were 5 music videos that came out off this particular project, and I want to say there were 5 music videos that came off this particular project, and I want to say on top of that that just about every song off this particular album charted on like the Billboard 100, not just the rap charts, but the Billboard 100 itself. And that's something that only folks like Drake or Lil Wayne or Nicki Minaj typically kind of do as far as that aspect kind of happens. So this was definitely, I mean, I think this kind of happened with To Pimp a Butterfly. That was a pretty hyped and anticipated album back in 2015, but this album kind of did that as well. And from what I remember, this was kind of almost like a surprise album. This one just kind of happened like back in February 2017. It didn't seem like this album was going to come out as much. I mean, it's not like it wasn't going to come out. It's just more of a surprise that maybe folks didn't know that, or maybe folks just didn't know or realize that it was going to drop just like 2 months later as far as that pitch going to happen. But I would have to say it's still a quality album here. I just would have to say in the sheer pitch of it. So basically the 3 singles, the first single is Humble. We're going to talk about this one. So basically, this is one of the Mike Will Made It beats. This is definitely a quality hit here. Definitely appreciate the overall concept of this particular one. This is like a pounding kind of on the block single. I'd have to say this is a good residential hopper. I would definitely feel like, and this is just a rave kind of party starter. And I would say that this song definitely gets you pumped for some outings, I would have to say. So it's a pretty dope concept. This might be one of Kendrick's signature. This one might be one of Kendrick's signature songs nowadays, just within the same pitch, kind of similar to Tupac's California Love, some of those type pitches where that's one of Tupac's signature songs, I'd have to say. But this is a pretty dope one. Definitely deserved to hit #1, I'd have to say. Kind of remember this song from back in the day. They used to play this on the radio a whole bunch, and even like rhythmic radio stuff like that. I mean, this was on pop rap radio, stuff like that. So Kendrick crossover. This one had a lot of crossover appeal. Wasn't just the hardcore rap charts and stuff like that. This is one that you could pretty much hear ubiquitously. I would have to suppose pretty dope concept. Get that one. Has a pretty pounding piano beat, pretty signature to that particular style as far as that pitch kind of has with it. Just a real affable type one. I would definitely say there needs to be more songs like this nowadays. I mean, back in 2017, I kind of remember this song as far as that pitch kind of happened, but it was just kind of, I mean, this was just Kendrick just out of nowhere, just becoming one of the most biggest names in rap music, just in terms of like commercial rap as far as that pitch can happen, which he didn't really as heavily do on Good Kid, Mad City, or as much of like To Pimp a Butterfly. So it's just kind of the concept. This might as well, I would have to damn near say that this might be Kendrick's biggest commercial album. I would have to say, I want to say that this album went 3 times platinum, which is a pretty good pitch to kind of get that one. Even if Good Kid, Mad City, and To Pimp a Butterfly had more accolades, I'd say this one's more of a commercial smash of an album, I'd have to say. So it's a dope concept. This is the #1 that deserved to get it. It was just a pretty affable single that's pretty widespread and universal at this point, I'd have to say. So it's a dope concept. Loyalty is another highlight. This has Rihanna on there. This is a pretty good pitch to kind of get this particular song. This is like a laid back kind of streaming classic of a song, I'd have to say. This definitely should remind you of Spotify and This definitely should remind you of Spotify in like the late 2010s as far as that pitch kind of particularly happens with it. This is an easy kind of hangout kickback gem, I would have to say. This is this is definitely a ladies smash from like the late 2010s, I'd have to say, and this is some overall pretty woozy fun, I'd have to say. So definite pretty dope concept for this one in particular. Just a good example of how to execute like the late 2010 styles as far as that pitch kind of happens. I mean, it embraces this particular style, but this song Loyalty embraces like the 2010 streaming type popularity that it had around that particular time, but it doesn't feel like like it's trend chasing. I feel like this one's more of like a trend setting type song more so than a trend chasing just at that particular pitch because it just didn't feel like there were many songs like it. I mean, maybe Drake was doing these type of songs, folks like that. Can't really think of too many other folks. Maybe like possibly J. Cole, some of those type folks, but this one's just a very affable type one that kind of keeps some of that thuggish edge towards it, but then also some of that California thuggish edge towards it, but then also has that keeps some of that California thuggish edge towards it, but then also has that streaming kind of pop rap appeal just about it. So it's pretty dope. Constant get that one in particular. And then Love is the third single, and this is another highlight. This is another one that got over a billion plays on Spotify. Humble and Love and DNA were the ones that got over a billion plays on Spotify. Pretty dope concept for that. This is like a pop rap. Love is like a pop rap radio ready malaise of a song, I'd have to say. This reminds me of NF and late 2010s entrees type songs that you would have heard around that particular time. Some of that palette as far as that particular pitch kind of happens with it. And I would say this is an unexpected type bop here, but I'd say Kendrick blends pretty well with this particular style. So this is the type of song that you would say for most folks that they would sell out just within this particular pitch, but I don't feel like Kendrick particularly kind of sold out on this song. It's just kind of one to sell the units as far as that pitch kind of happens. I mean, you need songs like this. NF would do things like this too, or he would have some of these pop rap type tunes, but it wouldn't necessarily be the meat of like the particular album as far as that pitch kind of goes along. There would be other type ones. Humble and Loyalty kind of prove that, but this is just one, like some car malaise, just stuff like that, just like some 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock p.m. type stuff, just as far as that pitch kind of happens with it. Just got done with work, just have some tasks and errands, to take care of, getting some snackage, some food, some stuff like that, just getting some fast food like a drive through, some of those type pitches, just the standard car malaise of just like After Effect and just the standard wind down type music as far as that pitch kind of has with it. Just a real nice pop rap one circa the late, just a real nice pop rap gem circa the late 2010s, I'd have to suppose. That's a pretty good highlight one. So basically, to talk about the songs I recommend on here, out of 13 songs in this particular album, not counting the song Blood, which is just kind of an intro that I didn't recommend as much, I'd have to say I wound up recommending 9 songs on here. So I mean, this is a pretty sheerly quality album. I'd have to suppose it's a pretty dope concept to get this one in particular, but I'm going to go ahead and recommend these 9 songs. So the 9 songs I recommend would be Humble, Loyalty, Love, DNA, Yaw, Element, Pride, Lust, and Triple X. That's just the basic concept of it. One of the best songs on this particular album, this is one that I saw from Lil Wayne when he rapped to this on like Dedication 6. I do definitely recommend this song quite a bit, would be DNA. Definitely like this song quite a bit. I'd have to suppose like I definitely have to highly recommend this song. I'd have to say this is like an electric kind of stepping out night fair of a song. I'd have to say this is like a glossy evening bounce that this song particularly kind of has. This is a dance gem and it's just a signature bop for like the late 2010s, I'd have to say. So this is definitely a highlighted one. This is another Mike Will made it beat, and this is a pretty excellent fair as far as that pitch kind of happens. Now towards the end of the song kind of switches to like a different type fair. It's not quite as much of like a club type bop. It's just there are 2 songs that kind of do that, or there's more songs that do it, but 2 of the particular ones that did it pretty well, I'd have to say would be DNA and then Triple X. Both these pull off that particular vibe pretty well, I'd have to say, just within that pitch. These are some definite kind of step out, kind of haze type songs that just have a lot of electricity about them. Triple X is another real sheer highlighted one. This has U2 on there. It says U2 on there, which is a pretty highlighted pitch to kind of get that. So that's some dope stuff there. But yeah, DNA is a definite electric kind of hopper that just really works extremely well. I definitely feel like songs like Humble, DNA, and Triple X are just some real kind of sheer type ones. Definitely some excellent weekend fare, I'd have to say. Definitely some dope concepts. I'm glad that Kendrick did songs like this, because when I reviewed the Kendrick Lamar EP from 2009, I remember talking about the fact that he just didn't have songs like this on there, and there definitely needed to be. It's kind of the same concept of Good Kid, Mad City, minus like the song Swimming Pools and some ones like that. I mean, I'm definitely glad that Kendrick did some contemporary kind of outing music, because it hits pretty damn heavily, I'd have to suppose. That's some definite good concepts. And then Triple X is another highlighted one, I'd have to say, just like I was talking with DNA. This is like some trap music. This song is a trap music rumbler. I'd have to say this is a good vehicle thump music. I definitely would have. This song is some good vehicle thump music, I would definitely have to say. And this is just an easy kind of day after I was Kickstarter, I would have to feel like. And this just goes well with DNA, like I was saying. So it's pretty dope concept to get this one in particular. It's definitely a good car rumbler. I'd have to say, good song to kind of have the speakers rumble and stuff like that in your trunk rattle as far as that pitch kind of particularly happens with it. It's some good affable type outing type music. Feels great just when your tasks are done and stuff like that, just for some good weekend type fare as far as getting ready to step out and just kind of feel the breeze as far as that pitch kind of particularly happens with it. Just some good outing type fare. Definitely feel like Humble, DNA, Triple X, like I was saying, these are just some great outing ones that just give a lot of exhilarating type vibes just for some good senses of just having that good particular elements about them, I'd have to say. But pretty good smoking tune on here would have to be Yaw. Definitely appreciate this one. This is kind of another one that reminds me of, like, I would say that this reminds me of a little bit of Good Kid, Mad City, I'd have to say. Yaw is kind of like a sleepy, dreary, smoke a few gem, I'd have to say. This reminds me of sluggish 90s fare like Infinite by Eminem. I'd have to say some of the production on like Infinite and the Slim Shady EP, some stuff like that. Some of those type pitches, like that dreariness that D12 and Eminem kind of had back in the 90s, as far as that pitch kind of goes. This is just a good hangout. And this song is just some good hangout for after hours, I would have to say. So it's a pretty dope concept. Get that one in particular, I would have to say. Definitely good for some smokage, some hot box type tunes, some stuff like that. Just some hangout type fair PlayStation type music, just some lackadaisical type streaming type music as far as that pitch kind of has with it. Just something to kind of have for background music. I mean, it's not like it's background music in terms of quality, but just some background music to kind of have for like some 2010s type pitches as you roll up some sweets and things like that as far as that pitch kind of goes along with it. So some pretty affable stuff here, I'd have to say. Element's a pretty highlighted one. This gives some pop rap vibes similar to the Love single. I'd have to say pretty dope concept. Get that one in particular. This is like a good 4 o'clock p.m., 5 o'clock p.m. type malaise. I'd have to say it's kind of an in-between cut for like some straightening, I'd have to say. So it's pretty dope concept for that in particular. Just would have to say about that particular one, just that. Yeah, to say about this one's definitely pretty similar to Love. I'd have to say this is another kind of one for like some car malaise and just overall stuff like that. Just some relative kickback for just like the after hours type pitch of just getting tasks done and some of those type pitches. Just kind of wind down type music. Not necessarily as much of like a turn up type song, but definitely something that like NF was kind of doing in 2017. Some of those type pitches, not like Kendrick is jacking NF or some of that type pitch, but just something that sounds like circa like pop rap radio when you flip on pop rap radio out of 2017, 2018, as far as those pitches kind of happen. This probably could have been a single damn near I would have had to have said. Element would have been a nice one, but then I also feel like DNA would have been a real excellent one to have kind of heard it on the radio as well. It was just kind of only 3 singles, which is kind of a shame because this was Kendrick in his complete commercial prime, I'd have to say. So he definitely could have capitalize on this album more. But Element's a pretty nice one, very similar to Love, like I was saying. It's another pop rap type tune for some makeshift. Lust is a pretty highlighted one. This is like a moody kind of evening malaise of a song, I'd have to say. This reminds me of like alternative rock, like No Doubt and some of those type folks, and Tonic and some of those type folks in particular. I'd have to say this is a nice gem to kind of get. This song would be a nice gem to start getting crunk to, I'd have to say. So this is one that kind of goes well with like Triple X and DNA and some of those type pitches. I mean, this was not as much of like a full-blown kind of turn-up song, but definitely something for like 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock p.m. as the sun's starting to set and you know that you're about to get rowdy as far as that pitch kind of has with it. It's a good concept. Get that one in particular. Pretty good Apple type one. It's pretty good album cut, has some character about it. It's just kind of an in-between type song as far as that pitch kind of goes, but I do like the concept of this particular one, especially the production fair on this one. Real nice highlighted one. And then Pride's another highlighted one. This is like a smoke a joint kind of hangout breeze of a song, I'd have to say. This is like a solid streaming kickback song. This is like a solid streaming kickback type song, I'd have to say. Definitely appreciate the concept of this one in particular. It's like a late 2010s relevant type tune, I would definitely have to say. And this is just a basic kind of fraternized type jam. So this is definitely some hangout type music. There's another song that's particularly like this. I forget which one it is, but I'd probably have to say like, yeah, there are a series of streaming type classics on here in particular, just some hangout type tunes to get within that pitch. I would say Loyalty is like the streaming song for the ladies. Yaw is like the streaming song for smokage and hangout and that sort of pitch, PlayStation type music. And then I would say that Pride is just more of like a vanilla type hangout and a basic kind of kickback type tune just within the streaming sense, that has to suppose. Pretty good fraternized type music as far as that pitch kind of goes along with it, I'd have to suppose. So some dope concepts here. So talk about some of the songs I didn't recommend on here. Basically, just the 3 songs toward the end, which would just be Fear, God, and Duckworth, were just not ones I particularly vibe with that much. Particularly Fear was just too lengthy a song. Couldn't get into that one as much. God and Duckworth were just ones that just didn't have that much affable productions on there, and they just kind of felt like awkward songs that probably could have been replaced with a more interesting topic or something within that pitch, to something a little bit more affable, I'd have to say. And then Feel is just kind of one I didn't vibe with as much. That Feel just kind of felt like more kind of homely in between type music. That was just kind of another Feel just kind of felt like awkward kind of in between homely type music that just didn't really have much of a fitting touch towards it. That was really that affable just within the pitch of being able to execute it that well, I'd have to suppose. That's just kind of there weren't many relative duds on this particular album. I would still have to say, because this album is relative. There weren't many relative duds on this particular album, I'd have to say, but because there were a shorter amount of songs on here, if there were just like a small handful even of songs I didn't enjoy, it still detracts from the score somewhat, I'd have to say. But it's still a pretty dope concept, and of course Kendrick's a pretty compelling lyricist. I definitely appreciate the concept of getting some of these just because he's easy enough to listen to as far as that pitch kind of happens. He handles these songs and doesn't drop the ball in terms of like the lyric composition and the song composition as far as that particular kind of goes. I mean, minus the songs I don't recommend, for the most part, he really sails through these songs and does it with a pretty quality pitch, I'd have to say. So it's a pretty dope concept. Now, the only real thing I would have to say, apart from the complaints about this album, is just the fact that there probably could have been like a guest or two on here, like a guest rapper. Just would have wondered who Kendrick would have teamed up with. It's not often that he commonly teams up with folks, but even a few Black Hippie members would have been pretty dope to have had on here, like Schoolboy, just seeing what they would have been up to in 2017. J-Rock, some of those type folks. Absol would have been interesting, of course, within that pitch. So it's just kind of the concept. But so me basically recommending 9 songs out of 13 on this particular album. I'm gonna go ahead and give this album like an 8.75 out of 10. I feel like it just damn near missed the cusp of being like a 9. What contributes to that a little bit is just the fact that I didn't enjoy the Blood first song that much. I'd have to say, just on top of that particular concept, I would just have to say 8.75 just barely missed the cusp of being like a 9 out of 10. It's pretty damn quality. It's an arguable kind of classic, I'd have to say. I definitely feel like critics probably herald this album more than I particularly do. Not to say I'm giving it a bad score. It's just kind of the concept. I know this was a big deal back in the late 2010s as far as that pitch kind of happens, and it is like a streaming classic and a relative new age kind of classic damn near as well, I'd have to say. So it's a pretty dope concept for that. The social score, I do think I'm going to give the social score like a 9.25 out of 10 because I feel like there's a lot of affability on here. I like the fact that some of these streaming and kind of hangout type songs on here. I like some of these lady songs on here, and I like some of these makeshift type songs on here, and I definitely like some of these contemporary kind of nightclub type songs. There's a lot of good affability. Quite a bit of this album's produced pretty well, I'd have to say. So it's a pretty dope concept to get. So it's a pretty dope concept to get a lot of these songs. This is a particular kind of contemporary smash, and on top of that, Kendrick's pretty popular overall. He has a pretty ubiquitous popularity, I'd have to say. So it's a pretty casual album. This definitely has the casual appeal about it, and it's pretty affable, and there's tons of songs to be able to fuck with and mention within social circles and things like that, I have to suppose. So definitely 9.25. So in terms of the future, like Kendrick dropped an album in 2022 and has been gone since. So in terms of the future, Kendrick dropped an album in 2022 and has been gone since. So hopefully we get some more quality material here as far as that pitch kind of happens. I mean, really, he's not on Top Dog Entertainment anymore, so it'll be interesting to see what happens with this next project whenever that particularly kind of comes up. But hopefully we get it soon, I would have to suppose. Don't really know what he's up to nowadays. Maybe a mixtape would be good, something like that. Seems less likely, but we'll have to see what seems less likely, but we'll have to see what happens next. But this is still a quality album here to recommend. I do recommend it rather much. And I do recommend this album rather much, I'd have to say.